we can edit as necessary at that point. A warm welcome to everybody. This is our fourth and indeed final ICA-Edu webinar for 2024. My name's Julian Park and I'm the chair of ICA-Edu, of the ICA-Edu committee. I'll try and keep us on time during the session and hopefully manage a few questions at the end. So it really gives me a great pleasure to introduce you Michaël de Clercq, who's from the University of Ghent, or Ghent University in Belgium. And he's going to talk about how he uses AI in kind of a private tutor role in the context of learning research methods, which, and as somebody that teaches, or at least until last year was teaching research methods, I think often both ourselves as tutors and indeed the students themselves need as much help as possible. So Michaël is an agricultural economist by training, but he has a really strong interest in how AI can be used to reshape the way we teach and the way in which our students learn. And I'm really looking forward, Michaël, to hearing what you've got to say. I think we've agreed that you will share your slides, which would be great. If I can just ask the other colleagues keep their microphones on mute while Michael's speaking. And if colleagues want to put questions, then please put them in the chat.
All right, thank you, Julian. Just first, I just want to quickly verify that you can all see the slideshow right now.
Yes, we can see that.
All right, perfect. Okay. So yeah, I'm very grateful that you're having me here today.
Oh,
I think there's some background noise.
Yeah, can we please ask colleagues to mute their microphones if they're not speaking? Thank you.
All right, perfect. Okay, so once again, thank you for having me here today. I had a quick boring slide about myself, who I am, but I think Julian already captured the essence quite well. I'll just repeat it one more time. So my name is Michaël de Clercq. I'm a PhD student and a teaching assistant at Ghent University in Belgium, the Faculty of Bioscience Engineering, and more specifically the Department of Agricultural Economics. I'm an economist myself by background, so I'm conducting a PhD in bioscience engineering, but also in economics at the same time. And yeah, my specific research mainly focuses on digital economics, which is a very broad term, of course. More specifically, the PhD, the dissertation itself is on broadband infrastructure and its wide variety of regional economic implications, whereby I use a variety of methods, quantitative methods, especially to some spatial panel data econometrics, growth theory that I apply, a lot of network analysis, and some Asian-based modeling. You'll see some of these things pop back up in the way that I use AI. So this webinar is about how I specifically use AI as a private tutor, but also how I think that students can use AI as a private tutor, that teachers can use AI to help shape their curricula, and so forth. And I just wanted to give like a very quick overview of like the traditional learning channels, right, that we've always had. And here specifically the learning channels for an individual student and how they process information, how they learn. So the traditional learning channels, we obviously have the lectures that they attend, also the direct engagement with lecturers, feedback that they can get on assignments that they're making, but also questions that they can ask and so forth. Obviously for students, a large amount of online sharing platforms, but also social media where students from the same class, from the same university share information that they have, summaries of courses that they use, solutions of exercises and problem sets and so forth. There's additional tutoring that you can get, some private tutoring and so forth. There's a course material within the lectures and within the courses. There's a wider social network, fellow students, but also friends and family that they engage with. And then in yellow, there's a self-selected material, which is essentially students, it boils down to students looking up information themselves, right? Information that's not provided by them, they look it up, they Google it, they look for additional papers, they go to a library, maybe a bit less nowadays, and so forth. And it's here that I actually want to integrate the use of AI as a private tutor and this self-selected material. Because, okay, there are different factors that could drive this self-selection, right? It could be that a student is very proactive. They want to know more. They want to learn deeper about specific material. But it could also be that they have limited access to one of the other traditional channels that we have here, right? They might not always attend lectures. They might have a limited social network to rely on. Private tutoring may be expensive and so forth. So self-selection is driven by multiple factors. And I think, whether a student is proactive or whether they have limited access to other channels, I think AI can be like an added value in both of these circumstances that we have here. So just wanted to contextualize it a little bit. And then secondly, I also want to contextualize AI a little bit more and just give some initial reflections. I think we all know quite well already by now what AI is and so forth, and which tools are out there. And one of the main issues that tend to arise with the use of AI, especially large language models, for example, that generate narrative output, is what is termed hallucinations, right? It's that they make up information and they give you output that's just false, it's just untrue. This is, of course, that's why I want to relate it a little bit to these traditional misinformation channels. This was always the case in the past as well, especially with self-selected material that students look up, right? Or if students just engage with themselves, or if they share summaries, it's not always true either. But one of the main differences with these traditional sources of misinformation, looking up wrong information on Google or in the library, or just engaging in wrong discussions, one of the major differences between those channels and AI hallucinations is traceability, right? The sources of the output that you get from AI are often just not traceable. You do not know where they come from. And traceability has always been kind of something that we tend to really stimulate in our students when we teach them and when we learn them how to critically reflect on everything that they see. Or even if you're just, if you're just in a local bar with some strangers and you're engaged in some kind of political discussion, usually and very often, arguments of traceability will emerge, right? How do you know this? Where have you heard this? Where have you read this? Can you show me a source or a news article and so forth? So traceability has always been important, and this is kind of diminishing with the current state of artificial intelligence. And this may be an issue in the future that I just want to throw here to reflect on, right? Because slowly what we get is that traditional online methods to search for information, such as Google, for example, they're also slowly being filled with content that's generated by AI. So, and more and more and more. So even if you try to avoid using, for example, ChatGPT to ask a question and to get information, you may not be able to completely avoid it in the future because your sources on Google may also be slowly more filled with AI generated output. So it's something to reflect on. Okay, what is the exact future of searching for information for us? And then one more thing. I want to talk very little bit, brief sketch of the current economic arms race that's going on, the global contest for AI supremacy. One of the strategic imperatives, actually, that's way more subtle than just gaining like market dominance in terms of technologies and tools that are out there, getting tools to businesses, getting tools to consumers, maybe actually the underlying accumulation of information that we have, and what I call here information capital. It's essentially being in control of the large amounts of training data, for example, that are being used to actually train a lot of these AI models. Because, if you actually own all of this data, you own the training data, it actually gives you, or it may give you, some more power as well to steer the amount of hallucinations that specific models may have as an output. It may steer the narrative a little bit. And then, for example, in this world, where at first glance, the AI markets, all the business-to-business tools, but also the business-to-consumer tools, it may look like we are in a very fragmented and dynamic market right now, with obviously some severe oligopolistic tendencies if we look at market shares. But underlying this all, there's actually some kind of monopolization going on in terms of the training data. Just something to look at, for example, is OpenAI's API, which is being used by a very large amount of small business owners, but also larger platforms for their AI integration. So essentially, a lot of these platforms are based on the training data that OpenAI controls and that they put out there. These are some very brief initial reflections because, if you are aware of this situation, we are obviously not aware of the future, but if you're aware of the situation, it actually kind of tells us implicitly how we should engage or how we can engage with current AI tools in a very sustainable manner. Or at least how I try to engage with AI tools, knowing this kind of information bias and narrative bias that's out there. For this reason, this webinar, very quickly, I will not give an overview of different AI tools that are there. I will not give an overview of platforms. I think there's plenty of information online. I think the previous webinar also covered a lot of these different tools already, so you can have a look there. I'm actually just going to showcase some AI illustrations that may help you with your research design, that may help students to actually delve into, for example, statistical theories that they see or qualitative research methods and so forth. I will focus on ChatGPT for this reason because it's a very all-round tool. It's probably the most all-round AI tool that we have, and that's accessible to everyone. And, I want to actually showcase a bit a mindset that I have in engaging with, in this case, ChatGPT, that's applicable to essentially perhaps AI in general, rather than actually showing you what specific tools can do. I'm using the paid subscription of ChatGPT because the free version is just very limited. And, we use a lot of specialized tools and software and academics, and a lot of them are paying anyway. So I think it's okay that I focus on the capabilities of the premium subscription. The mindset that I'm going to show a bit is, I strive as much as I can to be independent from these large language models, narrative outputs, given these hallucinations, given a bit the potential issue of this accumulation of information. I'm going to try to avoid being dependent on the output, the narrative output at least, that it gives me as much as possible. And instead, I try to exploit these multimodal generative AI capabilities to really follow specific instructions as much as possible. So it's actually framed within my, let's say, prior sources of knowledge. And these prior sources of knowledge, I will try to apply them to ChatGPT to give it some very specific instructions and creative instructions that we can all use. So with some of the examples that I will give now, I hope that I can actually really inspire some of you, inspire teachers, researchers, students, but also PhD students to perhaps experiment a bit more with these capabilities, and perhaps try to think about how teachers then specifically could integrate this mindset a bit and these capacities in their curricula, in their courses, to really sometimes make some of the theory and the data or the literature really come to life, let's say. Okay, just one more quick thing. This is from 2 years ago, but I mean, according to some publications, ChatGPT has been deemed an unreliable tool for learning. I don't necessarily want to disagree, but I mean, at least I'm going to try and show how it could potentially be used as a reliable, or at least a more reliable tool for learning. Okay, let's dive right into it and to some specific examples. So it's just going to be some showcasing, right? Because I think there is definitely going to be some things in here that you are not aware of that you could actually do, as long as you try to be as creative as possible. So let's just first look at generating some data sets within ChatGPT, like I said, right? So this is a prompt here where I just tell ChatGPT essentially to assume a fictional global population of 2,000 humans inhabiting our planet. It could be used, for example, here to introduce students also to sampling techniques and so forth. What does a population mean, a research population? What is a sample and so forth? I give it some engaging context as well. Okay, we want to present some descriptives at a conference. I tend to do this to come up with some engaging context like this, because when this is a gut feeling, so don't take my word for it, but I have a feeling sometimes, purely from experimenting, that giving it some engaging context may sometimes reduce some of the bias, but I don't know for sure, but I always accompany it with some engaging context. So, okay, we're going to design our own data set here, 2,000 humans. I could perfectly do this for 200,000 humans as well, and it really doesn't diminish any of the capacity that ChatGPT have. And then we are going to give it some instructions, for example. I tell it that I want an Excel file at the end, but that I want to use its Python integration to establish this data frame, because that will simplify some of the data generating process. And I also want to be able to easily adjust some of the parameters myself in the resulting code that I would get. This is a very tailored instruction, right? I really tell it what I specifically want. I want an Excel file. I want to adjust the parameters, and I want you to use Python. Very tailored. Then I also give it some flexible structure, some flexibility. Usually, you can then, ask more specifics about the flexibility and and really dive into ChatGPT, for example, train of thought. So, okay, you can establish certain distributions if you want. I'm not giving it distributions, but you can, of course. Then it would be like more of a tailored instruction again. Please always include some noise as well to data that you draw. And then again, some engaging context again, just to make sure that it really knows a bit better what the situation that I'm in. Okay. Here we are constructing the data set, right? So I want an identification number to every human, 1 to 2,000. I want a biological gender in there, male or female. It's a tailored instruction because I also, again, give it the proportions that I want. But I also tell it, okay, but proceed however you deem fit to establish the proportion of 48% male here and 52% female. And then I'd give it some suggestive instructions. These are very good as well to test yourself a bit more and to try out different hypotheses and so forth. So here I just say, okay, you may, for example, want to generate a gender vector with 0.48 times 2,000, the entry male, and 0.52 times 2,000 times the entry female, from which to draw on without replacement. It's a suggestive instruction. It's if you're especially a student, a bachelor student, you can just change it up to with replacement, and then compare results and very efficiently and accessibly see what differences you would get and test some of the properties there. Okay, we continue. I also want some different countries to my data set. Here I just pick 4, but again, if you pick 52 or 500 countries, it really doesn't matter. We label them A, B, C, and D. And just very flexible, I tell it some countries have larger populations than others. That's it, very flexible. Again, depends on your purposes, your specific purposes. I also want to add a regional classification in there, rural or urban. Again, okay, urban regions tend to have higher population numbers than rural, not to extreme degrees in this case. And their age, here between 18 and 65. You can look more detailed into some of these prompts. And then here I add an element sometimes for myself to practice a bit my own knowledge. I tell it to use a specific data generating process with noise, but I also ask it specifically not to tell me which one it used. So, I can try to actually deduct it myself afterwards with some of the tools that I have. Obviously, I can just dive into the code and see what it specifically did, but okay, you need some discipline in this sense. Then I add some schools as well, and I add some classrooms. It's very flexible. Again, I tell it to just determine an appropriate number itself of people per classroom, for example. But of course, I want some consistency in my data set. So I do tell it, okay, a school is situated within the lowest geographical unit, urban or rural within a country. In this case, I don't want it to contain citizens from a different region or country. And obviously, a classroom is constrained within a school, which is also bound by the same constraints as that school, namely within the same region. So if you have multiple people going to the same classroom, they should also belong to the same school, should also belong to the same region, and should also belong to the country. It's very good at interpreting this, so it will immediately get it right, as long as you're clear. And then just for some increased transparency, I also ask it to, if you have any considerations that I may have missed, let me know. If you need some clarification, let me know. And please elaborate on any decision that you made. Because I gave it a lot of flexibility in its decision making, I also wanted to elaborate to me which decisions it specifically made, so I can actually verify everything myself. This is just a data set. So, okay, it starts, it gives me an overview of some of the considerations, the clarifications, I can agree with them. Here it's kind of basic. It just suggests some specific proportions and so forth. And school results, I also ask for school results here that they had in their past and so forth. It's very basic. And it gives me the Python code. Okay. Now, there's something very helpful about ChatGPT's Python integration. It's that I actually don't have to copy this code and go install a Python environment and run the code myself. I can just ask ChatGPT, can you please run this code for me and give me the data set? So it does this, right? It just, you can see it here. It generates the Excel file and it gives me a link to download it. So I download it very quickly. And this took like 5 minutes to generate such a data set. I download it and this is what I get. I check it for consistency errors. There are none. Perfect. We can work with this. Just then you can just ask ChatGPT as well to give some descriptive statistics about this data set. You can check some of the distributions. You can very easily ask it to change some distributions if you want it in a different way. It's easy to test some hypothesis. So all of these graphs, it's just what ChatGPT gave me, right? So at this point, I'm still not really doing anything myself. And I've lost like 10 minutes of time just to generate a data set that I can then experiment with in a further way. There's one more thing I think that's really beneficial about focusing on exploiting, in this case, ChatGPT's Python integration, it's that it offers transparency and replicability, right? Because everything it does, every output it gives you, you will see this kind of button to click on. You click on it and you get the code that's behind it, the code that it actually ran into its own Python environment. So it's, especially if you have knowledge of Python, you can actually just, verify every small step it did and see if there are any errors in there yourself. So this is a bit what I mean with trying to avoid relying too much on narrative output and trying to really strive for this full transparency and replicability as much as possible, framed within your own sources of knowledge a little bit. So these were just some basic applications, right? Okay, we can showcase, for example, here some different sampling techniques. I'm not going to dive into specific research methods because there are so many and you're all probably doing something else in terms of methods. But here, especially for a student's point of view, you can experiment with some different sampling techniques and clustered sampling, stratified sampling, random sampling, non-random sampling, and so forth. That's a bit what we set up here. We can run some regression analysis to uncover some of the structure that we impose ourselves on the data, which is very good in kind of a teacher-student dynamic, and quickly get some descriptives without losing too much time or starting too much software. But there's much more we can do, right? And this depends a bit on your creativity. I tend to use it often as a basis for some of my research as well, in terms of what I call like some world simulations, right? So we can expand actually this data set. For example, and this is one illustration, I added personality types to every individual that's in the data set. You may know them, right? These 16 personality types that we have. I add them randomly here. I also ask it to first clarify by listing all the personality types so I can verify if they're actually correct. They're the correct 16. Then we also assign a socioeconomic status to all of the humans that we have in our data set. I ask to label them qualitatively with quite some variation. So we can actually, if we have some variation, there's some analysis that we can do. Just ask you to come up with appropriate labels itself. But as I said, you can be as specific as you want in this. I added marriage in this case, for example, as well. Some people are married to other people. I give it some restrictions. Of course, in this case, I said that you can only marry someone from the same region, I think. No, I didn't. But okay, obviously some consistency constraints as well. If someone with ID number 7, for example, marries ID number 5 in the data set, then ID number 5 should also be married to ID number 7. It's consistency. Put some constraints that they cannot marry more than a single person at the same time, and also that some people are not married. Then they're assigned the label 0, otherwise they're assigned the ID number of the person they're married with. Children, I also included some children here in the data set. I just asked it for a realistic number of children that every human has, and of course a consistency again. If someone is within a marriage, the two people involved obviously have the same amount of children. And personality types for their children. You can be as creative as you want, for example, when you set up a simulation like this. And here, in this case, I chose not to have personality types inherited or something, and that is just randomly chosen again. But you could obviously go as deep and as creative as you want. Then we get, again, I ask you to run the code itself, so I don't have to do anything myself. It gives me the Excel file. And we check the consistency here, and we see that again, it works. The married IDs are consistent, the number of children are consistent. We have the personality types and the socioeconomic status. One more thing, this is a bit in terms of network analysis, for example, that I tend to fool around sometimes a little bit. We can, for example, integrate friendships into this data set that we have. A random amount of friendships here. I also suggested how it could do this, for example. So I say, okay, you could integrate a vector. So each cell is a vector that can contain a list of IDs that all represent the friendships that they have. I ask it as well to visualize this network using the network X package in Python. Again, it has a Python integration, so you need to be a bit aware of what your capabilities are in Python. And just for some centrality measures, again, it's very brief, very general, but you can go as deep as you want based on what you are specifically dealing with, what your research methods are, what a course package is dealing with. So you should not be as suggestive and as flexible. You should not be as flexible as I am here. You can be as suggestive or even as tailored as possible in these different types of instructions that I'm giving it all the time. Okay, again, we instantly get, for example, the code. We also get the friendship network of a small sample here, I think that I asked, a sample of 40 individuals. Okay, this is a friendship, a social network with some top 5 hubs, people with a lot of friends in there. Okay. We can go even further. In this case, then I also looked at, okay, you know what, now let's, we have some countries in there, but now let's also really be more specific in terms of the spatial boundaries that we have. So here I ask it to take the individuals that belong to country A, and I ask it to spread them across a Voronoi diagram here, consisting of 100 cells, and each cell represents a region of country A. Fix X and Y limits from 0 to 100. They are the axes that we have, and color code the cells by their population densities. Okay, so then, for example, now we've added some spatial realities to the data set that we are generating here, and it does this. This is all ChatGPT output that I'm giving here. There's no coding involved myself at this point, and time-wise, again, took me perhaps half an hour in total. We can also, expand qualitatively. This is very interesting for students that want to practice conducting interviews, structured interviews, semi-structured interviews, focus group discussions. In this case, I again use the same data set that I've been generating. I asked ChatGPT, look, I would like to conduct an interview with human number 642. Remember that we have assigned random personality types. to this interview. They have children or not. They may be married or not. Their children have personality types. I've assigned a socioeconomic status. So I've assigned quite some data for ChatGPT to actually impersonate a data point in our data set. So it comes up here with a fictional character named Alexander. We have the demographics that are drawn from the data set that we've created. And then it talks a bit about family life and so forth. You know, we can then practice, maybe if it's in a course and we're learning about different qualitative methods or interview skills or whatever, you know, we can apply them, put them a bit to the test here before actually going to the field. That may be easy because you can gain some relevant practice and insights the way that you want to steer it yourself. We can ask ChatGPT or Alexander in this case to be more angry or to be a bit unwilling to participate in the interview. You know, you can insert some specific scenarios that will happen after a few questions just for you, or a professor could integrate these scenarios to happen after a while for the student to experience and work with. So as long as you're creative, you can honestly do almost everything. In this case, you can see that you know, Alex, after he talks about his wife and his 3 children, if we look at the data, we see that indeed they have 3 children. His wife is 28 years younger. So in the interview that I've conducted, they talk a bit about the challenges that they have due to the age gap in their marriage and how this affects the children and so forth. Yeah. Again, there's a lot that you can actually do. So I mainly, because there's not a lot of time, we'll try to wrap up a bit, but I mainly just wanted to showcase very briefly a bit what the possibilities are, how you can bring your data to life, how you can interact with data points, how you can practice statistical theories, and you have different theories, how students can bring these theories to life and perhaps use them to absorb this kind of untangible knowledge sometimes that they see especially in more basic courses, how they can absorb them more, how they can engage with them without, you know, having a large set of coding knowledge or Python knowledge or other software that you use. You can kind of circumvent these analytical, also mathematical requirements. So some of these things become a bit more accessible if you know how to kind of work with something like this. We can impose network structures, we can impose time dimensions, we can simulate hypothetical scenarios, such as, okay, a pandemic that all of a sudden occurs after we've integrated a time dimension. You can integrate some structural breaks. You can, you know, try yourself to find the structural breaks. You can have your students try to find the structural breaks without having to spend 2 days designing a data set or finding a data set that contains all of these properties. We can, for example, you know, this was a small example that I used to showcase what happens if, for example, one of our data points, one of our humans is a researcher. They want to conduct a research in their own region, but they have limited resources and they end up designing a convenience sample of people around them. So other data points that are around the same region and perhaps the same school or the same class. Okay, what happens in this case? What are the properties of this convenience sample, and how is it, for example, not representative of using really a more specific cluster sampling design and so forth? So these are all things that you can do if you want. Students can construct research designs within the boundaries of the simulated data, of course, but I mean, you can go as far as you want. You can set those boundaries as far as you want from the simulated data. We can convert some stylized sample facts from real data that we have, but that we do not feed to ChatGPT, obviously, to some hypothetical data sets, which allows us again to then experiment with different hypotheses, for example, and see what their implications would be and how this would translate to a real data set that we have or a real study that we're trying to conduct. We can mimic findings quite quickly from existing literature, existing papers that we can feed. We can ask, you know, we can get some stylized facts or some findings from a paper and ask and try to integrate them in the data set that we are generating and so forth. This is a very quick general overview a bit of generating a data set and trying to simulate perhaps a little bit of a world with hopefully a lot of space for you to find some ideas in. Then I also just wanted to give you some more specific examples. They're just brief, for example. We can ask ChatGPT to plot a cubic function then randomly extract 50 coordinates, and then, load these coordinates in a new chat, ask it to run an OLS regression with the following functional forms. And then, students, this can be helpful for students to see that linear regression, that a linear regression can also be performed on cubic functions, something that bachelor students sometimes find confusing. You can actually test all of these, see them for yourself. You can experiment with statistical errors that you add to it, with properties of these statistical errors, the implications that they have. We can reproduce empirical data, try to reproduce it. To the right is an empirical network data set that I have, and to the left is a reproduction that I try to simulate based on, of course, there's a lot of background that's in there, but just, we can try to very easily do this without having very deep coding knowledge. Can extract data from specific public sources. We can use it for data cleaning very easily. In this case, we had on the public library online from our university, we wanted to have all of the master dissertation titles from the past 20 years, I think, or 16 years. But there was not really a way to extract them very easily. We could get publicly an overview, but we couldn't extract them quickly without manually having to go through hundreds and hundreds of them. So, here I just simply feed the public page to ChatGPT, and I ask it, okay, let's come up with a systematic approach to extract it. Let's tokenize every paragraph that we have with the web page that contains these hundreds of titles. Only consider paragraphs with at least 8 tokens, blah, blah, and so forth. It requires some kind of way of structured thinking, of course. And then immediately I get, for example, this Excel file that, contains all of the titles without any mistakes, with the correct publication years added to them. Something again for basic statistics, for example, a dice roll, how does the central limit theory works, and so forth. We can just ask ChatGPT, can you just do this and visualize it? And we get some very adjustable visualizations as well of how it works. We can conduct or at least try out some economic experiments. We can simulate some focus group discussions if we want to practice them in advance. Here we can ask ChatGPT to set up a scenario where we want to play the dictator game, for example, with 100 rural farmers, and if essentially design as many scenarios that we want for ourselves to try out. If we are constructing such a design, or for students to practice or to extract some economic properties, analytical properties, and so forth. So a lot. I just want to show you some different things. It's a very hands-on presentation because there's a lot of theoretical and general explanations out there about what is AI, what can we do in ChatGPT, but I would just wanted to really focus on some hands-on things that hopefully many of you maybe did not exactly know yet how deep we could go. But in general, if I want to think about some more theoretical takeaways related to my approach, at least to using, in this case, ChatGPT, but like I said earlier, it's kind of a mindset that is applicable to hopefully also future generative or especially multimodal generative AI models. I think, in my opinion, that AI competences, or for example, if universities want to consider implementing gradually an AI competence course, that it may focus on problem-oriented and solution-oriented thinking, right? So first of all, how to identify problems and how to break them down into logical elements so AI can digest them. And solution-oriented thinking, how can students devise steps that may potentially lead to any specific desired outcomes that they want? But it's a very analytical way of thinking that's very similar to analytical courses, mathematical courses, programming courses, and so forth. But with reduced thresholds, of course. It's way more accessible for everyone to experiment with analytical and programming ways of thinking. But obviously, if you have this skill set yourself, if you have this knowledge, if we develop this knowledge, it still allows you to reap more benefits. and an improved knowledge of research methods, but also of this analytical and programming thinking combined. This really allows me, if I'm dealing with more advanced stuff, to strengthen these tailored and suggestive instructions that I showcased in the beginning. And it allows me to actually rely less on these flexible instructions, right? That we are feeding to these models. It allows us to be more specific, more suggestive, and actually tailor the output more to what we are envisioning in advance. But nevertheless, for ChatGPT specifically, its Python integration is central. So having a knowledge of Python is recommended, but it's not necessary. And that's what I mean with these reduced thresholds. It's not necessary to at least already engage with it in manners that would maybe 5 years ago have not been that easily accessible or possible without a strong analytical knowledge or a strong coding knowledge. So my main approach a bit in the way that I deal with it is nothing new, right, compared to 5 years ago. But it's incredibly time efficient and it's incredibly accessible. If I generate some data sets for students to work with and some hypothetical scenarios, it takes me literally maybe half an hour to construct all of it, while a few years ago it would have cost me like 2 days. And that's a huge time gain. And this time gain may actually allow also students who are limited in time to engage more with theory that they do not comprehend that well, but also teachers who are very time limited to integrate some more tangible cases into their courses. You can way more easily do this right now. So students can interact with the theory, with the modeling, with data. Teachers can integrate these more tangible cases in a very small time frame. And researchers can experiment with different scenarios, multiple scenarios, hypotheses. We can contrast empirical data versus theoretical data. We can test some research designs in the field that we should do in the field. We can test them a bit in advance in a controlled environment. But so the main takeaways here, for at least for my approach, is this efficiency and this accessibility, right? And that's kind of it at this point. Because I gave a lot of examples and basically left it a bit up to you to search perhaps a little bit how you could integrate this or apply this to yourself. I will expand on some more of these examples, and I will regularly upload some very detailed examples on my webpage here that I have. So with full prompts, but also with my way of thinking a bit, and really some different research methods for you to perhaps gain some inspiration. And if you have any ideas as well that you want perhaps me, for example, to really flesh out, you can always send them to me. Or if you have done something amazing yourself, please also let me know. Yeah, so I guess we're over time a little bit already, so I'm sorry for that.
Michael, thank you. That was a really fascinating oversight and certainly took my my understanding of the possibilities forward quite a lot in terms of just one package you were talking about, Chat GPT. Are there any questions that colleagues have for Michael at this stage? Maybe I can start with one while people are just thinking about that. What is the level and kind of discipline of students that you're working with mainly and using these types of data sets? Is it master students or is it undergrads or?
They're master students, but they're international master students. So it's mainly an international master's program. So we get students from all different kind of backgrounds. So sometimes we need to return to the basics, to undergraduate basics, let's say.
Okay, yeah. What's the just following up on that really? What is the student take on this? What is the feedback you're getting from students?
The thing that I realize right now is if I also showcase a bit these things with students, or I devise some of these hypothetical scenarios for them to practice with, it's that they struggle a lot still to apply and to replicate these things. So to replicate my results, for example, with ChatGPT is something that a lot of them struggle really hard with already. So that just gives me some kind of an idea already that there is kind of a learning curve to actually obtaining these results in the way that you want them as well. So that's why, we never start with, or I never start with using AI from the beginning. The really foundations that were in place 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, they're still equally valid. It's about gaining a theoretical knowledge and grasp and trying to avoid actually using AI as much as possible until, you've reached a certain level that you can try to integrate it with. But using AI really to uplift a bit their current level of knowledge is difficult, I think.
Okay.
At this stage.
Questions from other colleagues?
Yeah. Hey,
Please,
Michael. Yeah,
Oh.
thanks. I think it was a bit advanced already, indeed, because you're advanced in AI and doing things. If I think is your message not then you need to be very good already in this problem and solution based in analytical breakdown in order to build up your prompts. Is that what I understand then? That actually it comes down to actually we should have almost a course on AI competences, because what we're thinking about now is to integrate AI in current courses. But if I see this, it seems that we need almost a kind of critical analysis research methods, including prompt engineering as a competence.
Yeah, but the prompt engineering itself, I don't really know. I don't think, being good at writing prompts is really going to make a difference. I think it's more, your fundamental underlying knowledge of, or your level of analytical thinking and this problem-oriented and solution-oriented thinking that actually makes a big difference at this point. And, this has been important in plenty of courses, but this problem-oriented thinking and solution-oriented thinking, this analytical thinking, programming, coding thinking mindset, let's say, is for a lot of students, it's difficult. This is something that a lot of students struggle with, especially in translating this way of thinking to mathematical frameworks or to code, to efficient code. That's a big struggle, which I think, may lower a little bit. This threshold can be decreased a little bit. We can focus a bit more on how to think problem-oriented and how to think solution-oriented, rather than, okay, how to translate this now effectively into some kind of analytical frameworks. I think there's a big gain in that sense. So this again boils down to this accessibility and efficiency at the same time. When it comes to, I've mainly focused on this now because I'm trying to circumvent again this dependency on this narrative output. You can, of course, integrate some narrative output, but it's still a bit more vague, I think, in how we should explicitly approach it, because it's like Nigel said in the comments regarding this traceability, which is a huge issue in terms of the narrative output. We can indeed encourage students to independently validate AI outputs, as Nigel there said. But in a way, you're still again relying then on AI output. You're just learning students to validate the information that you get, which is obviously very relevant because we've always been teaching students to be able to validate the sources that they find. But yeah, for now, I'm mainly focused indeed on this analytical thinking, because for me, that's at least at this stage of the models that are freely accessible, one way to circumvent these issues of traceability.
Okay, fine, thank you. I have a final question, but if anybody else wants to come on, I'm happy not to ask my question. So at the more advanced levels, once students are progressing through their modules, do you get them to create their own data sets as well?
I haven't been doing that with students yet, but I think that would be also very interesting, to have students actually illustrate, for example, some theory that they see, have them illustrate them by also designing their own data sets, for example, and their own scenarios. I think that may be actually a fun exercise to do, and a very interactive exercise to have students do. Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential in thinking and reflecting on these types of assignments and exercises.
Yeah. Okay. Michael, we're going to draw to a close. Can I just say a big thank you? I think you've certainly exposed me, and I suspect several other people on the call, to new and innovative ways in which we can harness the power, if you like, of AI in our teaching and the students' learning. So thank you very much appreciated it. Thank you everybody for joining. I really appreciate that as well. We will, please keep your eyes open. We will be advertising more webinars in 2025. And on that note, I wish you all a good break over the winter break when we get there finally, and look forward to seeing you all in 2025. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. That was great.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
No, thanks for that, Michael. That was great.
Yeah, I just hope it could give some people some inspiration of what's possible.
There's both inspiration, isn't there, but also it kind of where we kind of started when we were discussing informally to start with, just keeping up to speed with everything, and I guess what you showed me is a whole different way of kind of approaching that teaching and research methods, which really.
Like this, it doesn't really matter which specific developments you get. Obviously, they matter, and we should be aware of them. But this is just you start from the own knowledge that you have, your own knowledge, and you treat it a bit as an assistant that you can talk to, and that can also produce some things for you. And that will always be the case. Probably in 10 years, we'll still be able to have AI just follow our instructions and have it produce things the way that we want it. So. Yeah, I think this is kind of a sustainable way to look at it without, indeed, as you said, being overwhelmed by all of the new tools and platforms that appear and pop up every day.
Yeah. No, fascinating. No, thanks. Thank you very much. There's people are asking if we can have the presentation, and I guess we'll put the recording up. But and are you kind of in the vanguard at UGent in terms of agricultural economists, or would most of your colleagues be using various aspects of AI to a certain extent, to a similar extent?
No, I think I'm the only one actually who's using it a bit like that with my data. All of my colleagues, they use it to us. A lot of them use it to search information, to get to know a bit more about a specific topic, which obviously, sometimes you have questions or you're looking for information that you think, how do I Google this? And then, if you don't know, you ask ChatGPT and you verify the sources and you ask it, how do you know what you're telling me, and so forth. But many of them are using it for that, or to restructure some paragraphs that they've written, or sometimes maybe to get a single visualization, but not in.
Yeah. That's good.
So sometimes I hope to inspire some people to be a bit more creative in the way that they that they use it.
Well, it's always, isn't it? There's people, often younger people, in the vanguard, and it's how you bring the rest of us along, really. Yeah.
That's up to the rest to think how specifically they can apply this to their courses, to their methods. I think it may be a good foundation, at least, to have seen this. No, thanks for having me.
Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Have a good trip to Belgium.
Yeah, just one day. I'm going tonight and coming back tomorrow night. So
okay, it's going to be rushed.
Yeah, but that's fine. I'll catch you later.
Yeah, catch you later.
Take care, Michael. Thank you. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.